Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London, and this morning I'm looking at a book from Oxford University Press, OUP, from the American part of the publishing company. It's got a simple one-word title, Hate, but it's then got an explanation about what it's really about. I think you'll get it quite quickly. Why we should resist it with free speech, not censorship. And it's been written by Professor Nadine Strossen, or Strossen, I do apologise, Strossen. Now, I've given the book review title the following: Protecting Free Speech in the 21st Century. Hate crimes are rising to the top of the political agenda in 2018. Certainly that's a sad fact of life in the United Kingdom. I can't talk about America in the same way, but clearly there are big problems here in the UK. Let me show you the book first of all. There's the front cover, then there's the spine. It's a hardback. There's the spine, and then there's quite a lot of blurb on the back which sets things out. Now you can see there is the author. There she is on the back, on the dust cover at the back, and then at the front there's quite a lot of information about the book as well. And I'll be commenting a little bit on what is said in there. There is in fact an index at the back, which is by page numbering. There's not a great deal in terms of the index, but you should find quite a lot of interesting stuff, because apart from anything else, there's a lot of contemporary referencing there. For instance, the very first reference is 1984 by Orwell. The book runs to 180 odd pages, and you can see from the way it's written there that it's all body copy all the way through. And if I go to the front of the book, there's some praise for Hate, the book, right at the beginning. That's the title. Then you've got some other books in the series that have been published, and then you've got the actual front page itself. Then there's a dedication, which I always like to show. Here you can see who it's been dedicated to, and some blurb about the book there. And then it's actually, after that, there are some quotes, again by various people, and then there's a contents section. There are 9 chapters in total, a concluding chapter at the end, then some acknowledgements, and then after that you get an editor's note. I haven't made too much. I don't want to spoil the book for people, because the editor is Geoffrey R. Stone. This is dated February 2018, and it sets out a little bit. It's the series editor for these books. And then you've got the actual book itself, and it runs through. There's actually key terms and concepts, and then we move from that to the book itself, which starts with an introduction, and then after that quite a lot of detail, and then you get into chapter 1, which is an overview, and then it runs through. Now this book is important, I think, for a number of reasons, because although this is a short review, the book is important because it's about 2 issues, and it's about the issue of free speech, and about the issue of privacy, and it's about the issue, of course, of the fact if you have privacy, you've got some sort of censorship, whether it be by forms of injunction or whatever it might be. And I'm producing this review on the basis much more of a legal approach rather than perhaps the political approach, because there are a lot of emotions and there's a lot of politics involved in this particular subject matter. But let me just say, to start with, this is the review. The title, I suggest, is slightly misleading for some reasons, because of the rise of hate criminality in 2018, which is continuing to dominate the political agenda. We've got it in a slightly different way, for instance, with the knife crime increases in London and big town centres here, which is based not just on hate but on criminality generally. And that is part of it, but we've also got tremendous problems with specific religious groupings and very, very, very strong extreme right or left-wing views. So there are problems. The issue of censorship then remains high on both the political and legal agendas, where no reforming change seems to be in the wind at the moment. that may well alter in due course. We have had some legislation, obviously, in the United Kingdom, and of course in the States they have too. Therefore, I think it's most useful to read this new book about hate from author Professor Nadine Strossen, who successfully, quote, dispels misunderstandings plaguing our perennial debates about hate speech versus free speech. We do not know, of course, whether she actually does this or not, whether she actually succeeds with this or not, because the matter remains high on the active things we must do, although no agreement seems to be where we're actually going at the moment, because the way is not clear for anybody at all. Now, Strossen illustrates her point that the First Amendment, and this is where the American bit comes in for the British audience, because it's all very much based on what's been happening in the United States of America. But she starts off with the First Amendment approach, which promotes free speech and democracy, equality and societal harmony. We hear too many incorrect assertions that hate speech, which has no generally accepted definition, I would add, is either absolutely unprotected or absolutely protected from censorship. And it still causes massive upheaval and anger for many accused of behaving in such a manner. And of course I would say in a free society it's much more difficult because there is that tremendous amount of freedom. So this being an American edition, the author says that the US law allows government to punish hateful or discriminatory speech in specific contexts when it directly causes imminent serious harm. And that gives you basically the test, if you like. It's unfortunate that whilst the government may not punish such speech solely because its message is disfavoured, disturbing or vaguely feared, raising a view raising a view that it possibly contributes to some future crime. And as Strossen says, when US officials formally wielded such broad censorship power, like, for instance, they suppressed dissident speech, including equal rights advocacy, problems can arise. Likewise, of course, current politicians have attacked Black Lives Matter protests as hate speech. And you can see that what we're talking about here is a balance, and frankly there is an imbalance, and that is the fundamental problem, because there is the right to free speech, but there isn't the right to hate people and take it to such an extreme that it then leads to violence and death. And if you look at that from a jurisprudential point of view, you can see the argument that is being put forward. Therefore, hate speech censorship proponents stress the potential harms such speech might further cause, such as discrimination, violence and psychic injury. That's an interesting expression in American terms. We could say psychiatric injury or psychological problems. That might be perhaps a slightly better way of putting it. However, there's been little analysis, sadly, of whether censorship effectively counters the feared injuries. In practice, we have a certain element of censorship and understand why. The question, as I've said, in a free society is how far do you go with that element of censorship? Citing evidence then from many countries, the author shows that hate speech laws are at best ineffective and at worst counterproductive. And I would agree certainly with that point. Their inevitability in terms of the vague terms that they invest in enforcing officials with this broad discretion to take action, and then with the predictability that regular targets are minority views and speakers, is the biggest single concern, I would suggest, for most people. So let me conclude by commenting again on what she says in her commentary. Prominent social justice advocates, she says, in the US and beyond, that's including the United Kingdom, maintain that the best way to resist hate and promote equality is not censorship, but rather vigorous counter-speech and activism. That approach seems the most practical, at least for the time being. Now, I leave that thought with you, because the problem is, if that doesn't work, you then do get to a position where the state has to intervene and there has to be some sort of mechanism of law enforcement. And that is the problem if things go to extremes. And I have to say, as a final point, notwithstanding the American side of the argument, but in Europe as a whole, we do see at the moment the emergence of very right-wing organisations again and right-wing governments, and that in itself is an indication that action may need to be taken in due course. At the moment, though, this book I think is a valuable commentary on where we're going at the moment. It was published on the 1st of May 2018. Let's just have one last look at it. There it is, front, side and back. And just opening it in the middle, we're looking here. What constitutionally protected hate speech should a hate speech law forbid? For instance, that's where they're looking, and that's where the talk by Professor Strossen is about whether, if we have to legislate again, how far we go. Now, it's in time of peace, and of course we are, as I say, a free society. But it gives you the level of the discussion, the level of the debate in this book is very high, and I'm very grateful to OUP for publishing it. Big thank you to all concerned, and let us hope that a little bit more temperance comes into this and we don't actually have to start legislating against something which, if common sense prevailed, it just means people tone things down a bit. Perhaps I'm just being a little bit too simplistic. Thank you to all concerned anyway. Bye-bye.